The more often that we draw our self-awareness to it, the stronger that our intuition is going to get.
Warning, the following presentation is intended for mature audiences. It includes stigma topics like sex, addictions, mental illness, adult dialogue, and strong language. Viewer discretion is advised. I am so excited. I'm with the wonderful, beautiful, amazing, brilliant Alicia Faith. She is just all things wonderful in the metaphysical world. I'm just so excited for this conversation. We're going to talk about listening to your inner voice and your intuition. So before we get into everything, Alicia, I would love for you to share a little bit more about yourself to all the women listening.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm so excited to be here today with you guys and Samantha in the Glow Up Summit. I am a psychic activator, an equine mediator, and an intuitive guide. What that means is I utilize my gifts and my training from Reiki and light language, as well as my psychic gifts, to help other women activate their own intuition and psychic gifts as well, so that they can move forward to reclaim their dreams and go advance those steps forward to get the needle moving in whatever their goals might be, short term and long term. Moving out of the country or just learning a new language, whatever the situation might be. We can help you get your goals set in order with intuitive guidance and your wisdom from your own spirit guides and things like that. So I help women tap into that for their own selves, so that they don't have to rely on somebody forever. We can actually activate all of those powers within ourselves. Everybody has those gifts within them, and it just takes a little bit of practice to get in touch with your intuition, and before you know it, your clairs are activated and blowing your mind every day.
Yes, I'm so excited, because for all the ladies out there that, you haven't really lived for yourself, you've lived for other people, this is going to be a really empowering conversation to really kind of learn some tools and tips on how to channel your shadow self, your intuition, and really listen to her, because I know that when I was living for other people, I was absolutely miserable. And now, like, living authentically to me and doing things that are important to me, that I'm really passionate about, I feel like so much better about myself, and there's just this light that is just shines so brightly.
Absolutely. That's very relevant. We have all spent our lives living under a shadow of guidelines and dogma and just our own self-trauma, all the way from childhood, and being told you can't color outside the lines, even, all those rules that changed our perspective of what beauty was and what love was in life. It's really important that we take that initiative to pull that power back and use it in our daily life again.
Of course. So, Alicia, why do you believe it's important for women to build their confidence in general?
I really strongly believe that when you build your confidence up, you're much more likely to fulfill your purpose. It's much easier for you to see maybe your mission here on planet Earth, or what you wanted to do with your life that maybe you surpassed because you had other obligations and things. So I really feel it's important to gain back your self-confidence, but self-confidence is really just a side effect in my perspective. So self-confidence can come in any form. You can be very confident speaking on the phone, but not very confident in your math skills, So whatever you do that you practice and you play at is where you gain your self-confidence. So that's why some artists are very confident in their painting, but not in sculpting. It's not what they practice at and what they get really good at. But a lot of artists do start to dabble in different arts, and when they play and mold things, they realize that once they begin to do it and play and practice these new skills, they're confident in that as well. And then once you have confidence, you can tap into your intuition again, because that's where your creativity lies. Your creativity and intuition come from the same place. So your confidence is very important, because that gives you all of the dreams and goals that you've ever looked to, and it's important to get all of that back so that you can have self-fulfillment.
Self-fulfillment is Oh my God, it is so underrated. And, like looking into your intuition, finding what your purpose is. And I love that you even brought up the fact that like artists, like they'll be like super confident with like one area of
Yeah.
like drawing or painting, but like then they go to a different area of that and it's like sculpting. It's like, no, but like they're really, really confident because and like they're painting because they've done that forever and they really focused on their strengths. And there's
Right.
nothing wrong with like going to sculpting and like working on some areas where they're not as confident, but when you really build your confidence and like shine is where you focus on your strengths.
Absolutely.
So what is the most confident thing that you have ever done?
I've done a lot of things that maybe I felt were easy, and I feel like something that feels easy does not necessarily mean that we feel confident in it. It just means it can be done without much need for willpower. So I honestly feel the most confident I've been was moving from Louisiana to Florida. I had just gotten out of a very bad marriage. It was a very violent marriage, and I escaped with my life and moved around so much with my kids from house to house in Louisiana, trying to stay hidden and away. And I finally decided I would have to move far enough away to make it too much of a bother for him. I went to my lawyer and he said, "Well, you're not supposed to do that." So against all odds and against all logic, I just felt the confidence that I came on vacation and visited. I came to see the location and places and houses and the schools, and I just had the confidence that this was the next landing spot. This was the next chapter in me and my children's life. Now, that doesn't mean I wasn't scared, but I was scared maybe of what the circumstances could turn into, what sort of choices and decisions I'd be forced to face at some point. But I had confidence that by making that move, I was doing the best thing I could for all things at play, that no matter whatever the nuances were, whatever the problems were, whatever the outcome was, whether I liked it or not, honestly, I just had the confidence that it was the right thing to do. It was just an internal knowing that this was just it. It was that, muscle up that extra strength. The mom lifts in the car off the kid, and it was just like you just go. You just have that internal confidence and strength to do it. Now, something that I had practiced at to build that confidence, since we were speaking of how you build that confidence, was, had I ever moved across state lines with my kids? No. But what I had been doing was moving from location to location and packing my children. And I had the confidence that I'd be able to go in and speak to a renter. I'd be able, a rentor, a leaser, or a realtor. That's the word I'm looking for. I'd have the confidence to pay that first bill. I'd have the confidence to put my name on something. I was no longer under the shadow of my husband with his name on everything and him making all of my life decisions for me. I now had the confidence to go about and do that. And then that's where that knowing came from, that was the right move to make. It just all the pieces sort of fit together sometimes, that it's just like, okay, that was good practice. Now here's the real thing.
Oh my gosh, I love that you just like were already listening to your inner self and your intuition, and it was telling you like, hey, like this is a good idea, like this is something that you need to do for yourself, and really listening to that gut feeling, because a lot of people refer to it as that, like we were always like, oh, like I have this gut feeling, and it's like, yeah, that's your inner self,
Yeah.
that's your intuition talking to you and telling you something. And I've experienced myself when my gut feeling has come up and I've ignored it, and then there's been like a bunch of consequences because I didn't listen to that. So I love that you shared that story when you're like, no, I'm listening to this gut feeling. I'm listening to my inner self. I trust that inner self so much that I am confident that this is going to happen and this is the right step for me.
Absolutely. It took some guts. It just took a moment of bravery. But I had the confidence.
That bravery, like you said, it's not like I was like completely fearless. Like, yeah, I was scared, but like I did it because I knew I had to. And doing like making decisions and going after what you want, yeah, like sometimes we can be scared shitless. I'm not gonna lie, certain things I've done, I'm like, holy shit, like I'm shitting my pants right now, but like I need to do this for myself. This is like the next step for me to take in whatever journey that it is.
Yeah, and we can suppress that so easily. We can suppress those thoughts in ourselves and keep putting it on the back burner, thinking of new ways and being creative and trying to figure out new ideas and ways to get around those decisions. But internally, you've always known, or you have a strong knowing of what the decision should be. And that's that confidence. Once you start listening to it and practicing that, you build the confidence to follow through a little more often.
What is your shadow self and how do you channel her?
Okay, well, your shadow self is actually a personification of she's the accumulation of all of the maybe rejections and traumas, all of the moments of feeling unloved and wrong and shameful that we develop over our childhood, that we carry with us into our adulthood as we mature. So we develop a sort of a personification around it within ourselves that we can learn to channel, because it is a piece of us. So when we are taking moments to be self-aware and recognizing that we have an emotion coming up, that maybe we don't really want to feel right now, and I hesitate to use the word negative emotion, because there are no negative emotions. They are just what you're feeling at the time. And as your perception changes over it, you will understand that it's just a signal that there's a trigger for your shadow self that needs some talking to, that needs some mending and some healing. So your shadow self is basically the opposite of your child self, of your inner child. Whereas your inner child is full of joy and playful and just throws paint all over the place, and just building mud cakes and splashing in the water and putting frogs in your pockets and whatever. All of the just life is just beautiful and nothing could ever go wrong. And even if mom said you could only have 2 cookies instead of 3, like, well, that might be a moment where you develop a spot that maybe you were a little upset or you didn't feel heard. And no, your mom didn't necessarily do anything wrong, but we're children when we're developing these ideas of how to navigate life and navigate people around us. So if we then feel that she doesn't hear that we're trying to tell her that we're bigger now, we're more grown up now, that might be an instant that it becomes the accumulation of all those little lost bits of ourself that we kind of pick off of ourselves, because internally we're not really taught how to handle our emotions as children. We're not really guided through any sort of process. So we've been told to hush, and we've been told to go and just cry about it and get over it, and you only get 2, or if you're like me, if your mom's like me and it's like, well, if you're going to cry about it, then you get none. So, but we take those bits of rejection and those bits of broken heart, and we take it personally. And that's where our shadow self begins, is just even through childhood, and all the way through into our adulthood, where we're getting into relationships and things, and we're creating a shadow of who we are, because we want to fit this idea of who society says we're supposed to be, or who our lover and partner believes that we're supposed to be, or who they want us to be, or who we want to be to make them happy. We shadow who we are, and so that becomes our shadow self. So the easiest way to think about it, again, is just the opposite of your inner child, of the endless bountiful joy. It's not a scary thing. It's not a monstrous thing. It's just all of the icky feelings that we don't really want to feel or don't want to talk about. So we just put it over there and we go back to pretending, but yet we're not in our child self either. We're just still back in this little box. So it's really important to get in touch with the shadow self. I don't know if you asked me how to get in touch with that shadow self a little bit. I think I would say the easiest way to do that is just taking those moments of self-awareness when you feel those emotions come up. Every time you take a moment to recognize where you're at, to take a moment of self-awareness, you're giving power to your intuition. You're taking a moment to feel and allow and question where that might come from and why maybe that's not a bad thing and why maybe you no longer feel that anymore. And it would be okay to say that that was then and this is now, and we're no longer in that situation, so we can love our shadow self a little bit more and heal our shadow self. It just is all, it's all intertwined. The inner child and the shadow self, they build a relationship together. You can work really well with the two of them to heal and get back to that joyous inner child self on a more often basis.
Oh, that is so needed. Thank you, because I recently have gone through some inner healing of my own shadow self, and I'd felt like a lot of emotion coming up, and I'm like, hey, like I need to cry, and I don't know like what's going on. And I lit a candle, I was putting on some music, and I'm like, hey, this one resonates with me today. And I'm starting to like channel like whatever's coming up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all this healing that I have forgotten about. And like you said, like this wasn't it, but it was like when your mom says that you can't have 3 cookies, you can only have one or you can have none. And it was something like that where like I was really hurt by something that I hadn't worked through. By listening to that shadow self and seeing my inner child, I was then able to like write a forgiveness letter and like work through all those emotions to let go of that and heal from that.
Yeah.
And then there was another instance where I was like, oh, like I think I need to do more of this work. And I go back and I do the same thing and nothing's happening. And I'm like, okay. And I keep trying and forcing this. And I'm like, hey, this isn't working. Nothing's coming up. I'm not supposed to continue working on this right now. Like there's nothing coming up for me right now. And I think that that's a big thing as well, is like when we try and force the inner work, then like that's not the time that we need to do it. Like you said, like when something comes up for us, that's when we need to work on that.
Absolutely. Doing it the other way and trying to force something come up can actually re-traumatize your inner child, can re-traumatize yourself, and make it even more difficult to come back to those emotions later. So always wait for it to come up on its own and to surface. And it can be the silliest little thing, or it can be something that was really traumatic or really powerful in your life. And when it comes up, you just acknowledge it, address it, love it, write a letter, take some notes, put your makeup on, take some pictures, go outside, do some cartwheels, find ways to bring it back to joy, find ways to bring it back to the inner child. What was the wound? What was the actual, was it the boy, or was it the fact that you didn't have anybody to go to the dance with, right? What was the actual problem? Because now that we're grown up, now that we're past all of that, we can go back with our adult perspective and look back at ourselves as a child and realize where we can not negotiate, but navigate those situations a little bit differently, how we might been the adult. We have to go back and parent our inner child and our shadow self is the way I look at it. If you didn't have, and our parents can't be around 24/7 anyway, you know, if we're at school and we get our feelings hurt, we have to be able to parent ourselves through that situation. So retrospectively, when those feelings come up, we can go back, sort of relive that moment and talk ourselves through it and parent ourselves through it and heal ourselves and then let it go. And then we will, those memories, even after they're healed, may still surface, but the healing has taken place, and you'll begin to recognize, and you may need to work on the same thing several times. I still have things come up where I'm like, I thought I was over that. I thought I healed you already. And I have to rework on it because we're only human. And so we've developed all of these, we're living a human existence, and we've developed all of these sort of nuances and these habits and these what was the word for something where it becomes second nature. We've developed these things, these tics that are just second nature. And so when we just remember something, it still might trigger us, but the fact that we can show it some awareness and give ourselves a hug around it and give ourselves acknowledgement for having healed it just shows that we're again at another more mature level, another awoken level, where we can see retrospectively again how we can go back in and be like, well, I might have missed a little something there. So it's it's a continuing process, but it's not something big and scary. Like you hear so many out there saying like, you've got to do the shadow work. You've got to, you've got to dive deep, and shadow work sucks and it looks all scary, and it dies with that. And a lot of my shadow work was disgust of it. All of those who were, I just wanted to get back to the shadow self and the inner child relationship there, that we can always go back and remend from another perspective. So the shadow work is what is not scary. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be playful, because our shadow self is just the child that needs attention, that needs love, and needs to be cherished. And we're adults now. We can do that. We can cherish our child, ourselves. We can go back and give ourselves the love that we might have missed out on.
Oh, you are bringing up stuff for me right now. Like just that last comment that you're like, now that we're an adult, we can give ourselves that, like that inner child, that love that we may have missed out on. And I remember when I was working through some of my inner child and shadow self work, and I was just like visualizing giving myself like a hug when I'm like 5 years old, like this version of me, and then the 5-year-old version of me that's like kind of sad and broken from certain things that happened during my childhood, and hugging her and like cuddling with her and letting her just like go off on these tangents about like whatever she wants to talk about. And that gave me like so much peace and so much like healing from some certain things that happened in my childhood. So I love that you brought that up, because I'm like, girl, like you're reading my mind. I like just did that like not too long ago.
That's beautiful. That's so awesome, Samantha.
So what kind of encouragement or advice would you give to someone trying to find their truth and really listen to their intuition?
Again, I would say play like a child. Let that inner child befriend your shadow self. Let like you said, let your inner joy hug your inner sad. Let them be friends. It doesn't have to be this vicious scary thing. Like it's hurtful and you cry, and it's not always fun. You get to have fun healing yourself. You get to find the moments in the sun. You get to go throw paint at the wall if you want to. You are now the parent of yourself, giving yourself permission to do the things and be the person that somebody else wasn't letting you become. You now get to become that. You just have to give yourself permission to step outside of the cage. Our cages are illusionary. Our cages are just our cages are non-existent. And if you just give yourself permission to walk outside of that and take a step outside of that and go back to it, it's gonna heal. Your inner child, your inner joy heals your shadow self. And so my biggest encouragement would be to play. Let yourself play, whatever it is that sparks a bit of joy, no matter how silly it is. If it's picking flowers and making daisy chains, if it's blowing balloons, if it's blowing bubbles, if it's jumping rope, and if it's running, but running silly instead of having to run so professional, like whatever that. I think of the episode of Friends where Phoebe and Rachel go running, and she's like, ah! Like if that's what you feel like doing, God damn it, do it. Just go for it. There's nobody here to judge you but yourself, because nobody has a right to judge you. Everybody is being judged themselves. Like we are our own worst critics. And as soon as you empower yourself, just like in that episode, as soon as Rachel knew that it was okay to be funny and silly, like she jumped on board and she went with it. Like and it was fun and it was empowering and she loved it. So it's this same sort of thing. It's just giving yourself permission. So give yourself permission to go play. And if that's talking on the phones to your friend or putting too much bubbles in the bubble bath, whatever it is that feels good to you in that moment. I know a lot of people say turn on some music and just dance. Do that too. I mean, that's one of the things that I feel is silliest at doing. And sometimes it's just what I need to do is just turn on some music and just dance and just wiggle around the room and just get some movement and some energy flowing. So yeah, I would say just play. Give yourself permission to enjoy life again.
Thank you for that reminder. I know I definitely need that as well, even though like I've done a lot of inner work. I've done the child work, the shadow work, but it's like you still need to have fun. And by, like you said, like doing cartwheels or blowing bubbles or making those daisy chains, like you can still like bring that inner child back to life, heal her as well as your shadow self, and break these like generational patterns that occur. So for example, like I know that like my mom, she would, or like my parents, they would tell me like, oh, like you need to chill out, you need to like tone it down 7 notches, and like you can't really express yourself, and they were told the same thing. So like there's these generational patterns that happen, but when you work on your inner self, that shadow self, you can break those patterns. And then whether you have your own kids currently or you are going to have your own family, then you can encourage your kids to do the opposite of what you were taught so that they can become these amazing individuals. So how can women build their confidence by listening to their intuition and inner voice?
You're like, from what we were saying earlier, I believe your confidence comes from practicing and playing those things that are making you feel good, those things that you want to get better at, those missions, those purposes, and those goals that you set forward, to go ahead and do those things. Every time we acknowledge one of those callings, every time we acknowledge our intuition, we become that much more self-aware. So every time whether it be we need to check the mail, or we need to call that friend, or whatever we have, any of those instances that come up through our day, the more often that we draw our self-awareness to it, the stronger that our intuition is going to get. So just acknowledging it. The more you acknowledge it and you're like, hey, I felt that. Okay, I will go check that mail. Like, there might not have been anything in it, but the more you start doing it, the universe is going to recognize, like, hey, she's stepping up, and I'm going to meet her there. And the intuition then grows into something almost supernatural.
Yes, I totally agree with you that like when you bring more awareness and acknowledgement to emotions and things that are coming up for you, then you can like move through them faster and you can level up faster, and the universe recognizes that because they're like, oh, look at her, like she's becoming more in tune with herself, and she's going to like level up here like way faster because she's doing all this inner work. Anything else you would like to add to this conversation?
I think I just want to remind everybody that your intuition is just like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it's going to get. And the more you let your inner child play, the more happy your shadow self is going to become. They just integrate more and more within their friendship, that the one just becomes the joyful friend. So if you could work on those two things, I think you'll see a lot more development in some of the goals that you set forward into your life, and fulfilling sort of that self-purpose, giving yourself permission to be that person, that self-fulfilling, that inner joy just continues to grow and blossom. Use those muscles.
Yes, ladies, use your intuition muscle and just listen to yourself, because then you can figure out like where you want or where you need more fulfillment. So this conversation has been so beautiful. I always love all your like nuggets of wisdom and all your expertise. So Alicia, thank you so much